All right, so we start off with Embakasi South, and I'll start with you, Mr. Musau. On, the campaign trail, of course, now ended yesterday, that being the last day, Julius Mawathe being the incumbent, or the one who was holding the seat. But it's like Patrick Amimo says, a two-horse race between Sumra and Julius Mawathe. But what's also unique about this particular by-election is the fact that there's what we call sibling rivalry. We have ODM and Wiper, who are meant to be, part of NASA, but, competing against each other. Do you expect that would bring some dynamics that maybe were not expected?
Well, I think it's going to be, yes, it is sibling rivalry, but we must remember that ODM and Wiper are
two different parties.
Two different political parties which can be able to field a candidate in any seat in this country. So their coalition agreements notwithstanding, the two candidates who are vying on the respective tickets are bona fide, and they can be able to compete against that. Of course, that brings a lot of heat within the so-called coalition, the arrangements, because Sumra is a former member of parliament for that particular seat. Right. He has some good support, local support. He has a history in the area. Mawathe is the incumbent. Wiper will feel, and they have argued that they would feel very disenfranchised if that seat was lost, especially considering that those arrangements.
And that's the complication right there, because if it was lost to ODM, then it leaves them feeling like, are we still part of one team? Are we playing in the same team, or are we playing in different teams? Although, Mr. Orengo, then the question then would be, is it fair to still consider NASA as an arrangement or, a coalition?
I think still, with this by-election, I think it's still a coalition. You don't see the kind of violence that we are seeing in Ugenya. And it seems that the Wiper has got an upper hand. And they let the campaign happen normally. So I don't think there any rivalry. And I think it's very peaceful. And I think the Wiper party probably has an upper hand, but there is no real competition in terms of violence and such that we are seeing in
Embakasi. Do you
quickly add that the issue of I think it's a good thing that Wiper and ODM are competing in Embakasi South. The good thing about it is that instead of parties agreeing who should be a candidate for people, because people need to choose for themselves who their leader should be. So when parties agree in a boardroom, it takes away the hand of the citizen from making the decision. So I think for me, from an observer point of view,
democracy playing out.
It is democracy playing out, and the citizens now have options that they can be able to choose from.
And maybe it should be encouraged.
And the two coalitions didn't try to do that, to go to the back room and
agree on
which candidate on that.
Right.
So they let it.
Kevin, do you agree that that's a progress in the right direction, especially given that so far in Embakasi we've not seen violence, and campaigns, people are allowed to give credit to their people, but at the end of the day there's not been violence in Embakasi.
Yeah, that's something worth writing home about and asking us to emulate even as we move on to 2022. And you also note that Jubilee opted not to field a candidate despite issues of course, one of their most hopeful candidates having the view that he would have been allowed. But I think the Secretary General was very categorical, and from where I sit, I see the handshake at play within that kind of an arrangement between ODM and Jubilee. But I think that it also presents some lessons to learn, especially given our political party coalition arrangements, and probably people like Mule who engage with political parties and elections would probably want to do some thesis around this, to the extent that how do we therefore ensure that when parties are in a coalition, and I like the fact that Mule has already reiterated that political parties are free to field candidates, but when you have an arrangement where those kind of agreements do not play this at the same level, because if this was happening in other parts, it's only quite interesting that it's happening in Embakasi South and Ugenya, but if we had a pure election, for example, where you have 290 seats, we've had areas where the coalition arrangements actually come to the fore, and individuals are actually even blocked from vying for positions because of coalition arrangements. So I think that we need to dig deeper into this and find out how do we ensure that if we only have a small, seats, how does the coalition arrangements within political parties play, and especially for very contentious seats. Yes, we can say that Embakasi South has not given us the magnitude of violence, but if you went further into the citizens, the voters themselves, what does this mean to them? Because sometimes I have a feeling that if we have our efforts and our strengths put together in one basket, so that the two individuals have a working agreement, because as you rightfully said, if one party loses, the other one will feel disenfranchised, and they'll be like, do we really still have a footing in this area? But if they sat down and said, you know, you are NASA and I'm NASA, you are Wiper and I'm ODM, why don't we agree? You go for it, but then when you win, I want to support you in this manner, and the following have to. The same arrangement that we have seen with ODM, the former Prime Minister, and Jubilee, the current president, on the handshake. If that played in that manner, I think coalition agreements and arrangements would be much more progressive, and the citizens would also feel part and parcel of those arrangements, including political parties. Because in this case, ODM loses, for example, ODMers, if I could use that term, would feel, okay, this was never ours, so how do they therefore feel part and parcel of that sub-county of that constituency? So people like Mule would want to find out.
Yeah, I want to bring in Mr. Musau as the National Coordinator for Election Observers Group. One of the things that Honorable Wetangula mentioned is that Mawathe is not there because of the people, he is there because of IEBC. And the question then comes in, are IEBC ready and prepared to actually hold elections? We are looking at 2022 coming up, but here's a by-election. But we still have very many issues that took us to the brink of war that were IEBC based. The fact that people felt that it was not fair. Do you feel from an observer's point of view that IEBC has done what is necessary for people to have confidence in them to be able referees?
Historically, the management body has always done very well on by-elections, which is one of the reasons why, as observers, we have said that this idea of cumulative voting, having 6 ballots on one day, needs to be looked at, because it is fatiguing. There's a lot of fatigue which comes from that process, and there are very many errors which are committed by omission or commission during the general elections. In the by-elections, if you look at the history of by-elections in the country, they have done very, very well. Where even results were to be transmitted, they have done very well. They have planned for them. We have seen their preparations. They have undertaken the voter education programs at the right time. They have personnel. They have the necessary equipment in those places. We have posted observers in both Ugenya and Embakasi South. And the RO, for instance, in the returning officer in Ugenya, has reprimanded even the candidates. I've even had to have meetings with the candidates because of the ongoing violence. There's been a lot of violence in that campaign. So he has had to reprimand them a number of times, even to the point of threatening to expel them from the election. So see, I see them in much more control during the by-election. And I think it's because the work is less. They're able to focus more. There's less noise. Remember, during elections, there's a lot of noise, political noise. So they're able to focus on their work. So I believe that they'll be able to conduct themselves very well. But that said, the issue of, what Wetangula has talked about in terms of IEBC, petitions come from very many things. There are a number of things which can create the opportunity for a successful petition, including some errors by the management body, but also by other issues which can be disputed. So we are legitimately at a by-election because some of those things were committed, and it's not so much about just IBC, but also the fact that a due process was followed, and a successful petition was procured.
Yes. All right, coming to you, Mr. Orengo, we have Ugenya, but Ugenya seems to be a different case in terms of the political tension. There's already been spurts of violence that have been reported to a point where the two main contenders, Chris Karang and David Ochieng, have even been summoned by IEBC. What might be the cause of this very high political temperature in Ugenya?
Yeah, first of all, I come from there, and I must say it's very unfortunate. Ugenya constituency have a history of, I remember the days when my brother and Mwanga contested in 2007. There was violence, and actually people lost their wives. It shouldn't come to that level where people lose their wives. Right now, I think the burden is on the candidates to campaign in a manner that they tone down the violence, they also need to speak to their voters and say, hey, violence is not the key to win votes. You win people's hearts, you win votes by telling people what you're going to do for them. But violence should be the responsibility right now for the candidates to preach peace, win the hearts of voters, and eventually there's no place for...
What makes the stakes so high, and what makes the people in that area, for one reason, become so passionate to a point where they're willing to become violent?
I mean, I would equate that to a football match where the fans... yeah, that kind of fanatics, that the supporters become violent and they are rattled up and, you know, ready to take arms for that. And I think the candidates bear the responsibility to do that, that, you know, there's no place for that. Because, you know, the electorate are, when rattled up, can do that.
Can do that.
So they should be able to tone it down.
Kevin, your thoughts on what we should expect from Ugenya? We are hoping and praying that it's not going to be violent come the by-elections, but we've already seen signs that it could be if left, you know, the way it is right now.
Institutions again, and so that political parties need to strengthen their disciplinary measures on this kind of arrangements. The code of conducts need to come to play. I believe that as IEBC has had and will continue to have sessions, even as we move on to Friday, the political parties also need to come to the fore and you know, ensure that they talk to their candidates and even put measures that, because we've had leaders saying that it's there is no election, that no single life should be lost because of elections. I think that's the right one. So why should we have violence? And these are citizens who peacefully coexist and live every day, even before and after and during elections and all that. Why should we be able to have platforms which are created by politicians to ensure that we fight each other and kill each other? So I think that as citizens, my message is let's exercise that restraint. Political parties through their different frameworks and setups and codes need to come to the front and to the fore and ensure that those codes actually do what they are supposed to do. IEBC, it's not just enough to threaten that we will throw you out, of this election. Throw people out and then let's see how it plays. Just throw them out and let's see how that plays.
Yeah, and Mr. Musau is going to come and ask you the same question that IEBC has been under pressure. There have been calls for IEBC to actually disqualify the two candidates, given that it's their followers that have been violent. And just like Mr. Orengo says, they do have a huge responsibility that they bear to make sure that they control or speak to the electorate that supports them. Do you think that would help us as a country even moving forward? If this was set as an example, disqualify them at this point, and then others will learn.
That's a very valid point. And we've been making the same proposals ourselves as observers, that we need to see action on electoral offenses. There must be action. The culture of bribery in this country, the culture of violence around elections in this country will not end until we start taking action. And not just on the big guys, but even on the small village people. Why is everybody, I mean, everybody knows that if you go to, in every part of the country, there is the equivalent of kitu kidogo around elections. I keep saying that when I go to my village during election time, people don't even go to the farms anymore. They wait for their collection at the market points. And that is farming for them. So this culture has to end. It is going to end when we start taking action on anybody who's been bribed, anybody who's caught. It's going to be very difficult. I think IBC is also trying to be very cagey on this issue, because it's going to be very difficult for you to say Karan is the one who instigated this violence, or Chieng, because it could also be the other opposite. And somebody, there must be investigations, deep investigations to this, which IBC may not have in terms of time to be able to address this. So they can only do a lot of threatening. But I would like to see the police, the security agencies, the courts, the judiciary, and IBC coming together to tighten the laws or the framework of laws around electoral offenses. That's one of the big areas that we have a problem in the country. The loops or gaps in terms of how can we be able to apprehend people who are guilty of committing electoral offenses.
All right. And the other thing that, of course, we look at, and if we look at Ugenya and Embakasi equally, is are we as Kenyans getting to a point where we follow people for ideas rather than just personalities or parties or tribes, Mr. Orengo?
I think it's still based on personalities and tribe, both at the same time. Kenyans are divided on either tribal or regional. So unless the electoral boundary are divided in Kenya where it's across rather than divided by regions and tribes. So it's very much tribal, very much personalities within that tribe. And it probably will have to continue that way until we change the electoral boundaries where, for example, if you take a Kenyan map and you say the zone from Kisumu up to Mount Kenya belongs to one zone as a boundary, electoral boundary. So the Luos will have to vote with the Kikuyus in the same zone. But that won't happen. So it's still based on the region.
On the region and the tribes. And I want us to listen into what some of the leaders in Ugenya had to say on their campaign trail. And again, come to you, Kevin, on the question as to whether Kenyans, we're getting to a point where we listen to people because of the ideas that they bring on board, vis-a-vis how they take care of Wanjiku, as opposed to following people just purely because of the party or tribe that they belong to. Let's listen into what they had to say.
The election is about the needs of our people, the needs of the Ugenya people. In this election, Uhuru is not in the ballot, Raila is not in the ballot, Ruto is not in the ballot. The persons in the ballot include David Ouma, David Ouma, and David Ochieng has a very good agenda for this constituency. We know that our people need food, so we provide for food security. We know that we need water, so we work for water. We know that our people need good roads. We will make sure that our roads are tarmacked. We know that our people need to go to good schools. We make sure that good schools are here. On
5th April, when the elections will be done, the MP will still be Christopher Udhiambo Karan. Wangapi watapigia Karan kura hapo? Kwa hivyo, si ati tunachagua tu kwa sababu ya kuchagua. Tunachagua Karani kwa sababu ni kijana wa maendeleo. Ndonge kamano. Tangu niingie hiyo mwaka moja nimekaa katika bunge, nimefanya miradi mingi katika hii constituency. Kweli ama si kweli? Kweli. Basari tumepeana ama tukupeana? Tumepeana.
So Kevin, listening to them, you even try and, deduce what have they said. And I look at David Ochieng, he says that he comes with a good agenda. He doesn't tell us what the good agenda is. Or maybe he does when he says we need food, water, schools, but he doesn't say how. When you look at Karang, he says, nimelete miradi mingi sana na maendeleo, lakini hatuambii ni miradi gani. So when we look at even the quality of their thinking and campaign, one is left wondering, do we really have hope for this country?
Mike, there is hope, but I think that hope is still a little bit miragic. Yes, we can see it, we feel it, we touch it, but it's quite distant because of the manner in which our politics is organized. And I liked your introductory statement because you said, is it politics, is it personality, is it really ideological, is there anything that we can touch around our politics? Unfortunately, there is, as it is right now, there is nothing much because we have ascribed our politics to individuals, personalities, political parties who basically are carried by individuals, and that's why an individual can skip from one party to the other. Today you are in this one, tomorrow you form the other. And even the office of the registrar of political parties, I think, needs to come to the fore and help in this, because we have very clear measures on registration of political parties and even management of those political parties. Ugenya is not very far away from where I come from, because it's Siaya County and I come from Siaya County, 45 minutes drive towards Rarieda. And so Ochieng's reign, I can pick and count. And given the work that I do, county governance watch, looking at county governance and sub-county issues and development processes, we can track, and we have done a tracking on what happened when Mheshimiwa Ochieng was an MP and what Karan has been able to do, Mheshimiwa Karan has been able to do. There is a clear difference in terms of what we can ascribe to Mheshimiwa Ochieng and the other. But I think the citizens have not been given the opportunity to engage with those kind of issues. Why? Because one, we haven't organized ourselves to the level of engaging effectively with the politician. So many times the politician comes and we were told he arrives at 8, so we left our homes at 4:30 in the morning. The gentleman or the lady arrives at 3, picks the microphone and speaks the kind of things that we hear them saying. There is no forum to engage and ask questions. There is no opportunity to want to ask them, you said this when you are running, you've been able to do this, what happened? We have papers, reports on newspaper about corruption, that our CDF is supposed to do this. So the politicians feel like it is our platform, it is our thing. So there is really no, and if you talk to politicians, I'm sure that some of them are your friends. They will tell you, Mike, for me, it's about the money that I put in while campaigning. Hence the kind of insecurity and violence that we see in our politics, because the stakes are so high. The second thing, so that then my colleagues can also come in, is the issue of constitutional frameworks for citizens. We have recall clauses, but a recall has been made so difficult for any citizen who wants to recall a parliamentarian, because yes, it's not possible to get, of course, 500,000 or whatever number of signatures that you need. Not everybody will get 500,000 to be able to put forward a recall clause. So in my view, I think that we also need to have a discussion around how do we make it very easy for people who have been put in office to deliver certain services and to perform certain functions. And when and if they don't, then the citizen has the power, because people have left their busy schedules to come and listen to you. But look at what you are telling us. I will ensure there are roads. Who said it is the role of the MP, for instance? So Schedule 4 functions of county and national government, including institutions like parliament, so that when you say, I'll ensure you have food, who said it is your role to? So we need to bring it down to the level of citizens, even organizing into residents associations and having, the way we go to meet our leaders and they tell us appointment time, so we also give them appointments. As residents of farmers from Ugenya constituency, we give you an appointment for Wednesday at 10 a.m. If you are not there, sorry,
then
we will
would
not
have
vote
to
for
take
you.
action on you. Now, gentlemen, will have to wind up, but I want us to wind up with your closing comments. I'll start with you, Mr. Musau, on the question of, and maybe just an advisory capacity to the citizens of Ugenya and those of Embakasi as the by-election comes in, to make wise choices, because these choices will affect them.
I think you're very right. First, of course, it is important that they make very wise decisions in terms of the person who's going to be representing them in the National Assembly, because that person wields a lot of power in terms of making determinations or making sure that the proceeds or other things and development can be able to go back to the, or represents them the way they want to be represented. So they have to make wise decisions. They shouldn't think, at this time we can't think party. We must think individual, because we're not seeing parties deliver on their mandate. The second issue before I close is just to support what Kevin has said, and he's been very consistent. I've listened to him since he started talking. He's been very consistent on this issue of public participation. We need a critical citizen agency, level of citizen agency in this country to interrogate our leadership. And therefore, massive political education needs to be undertaken. Not just the civic education, which tells you the do's and the don'ts. We want political education. People must understand their power, so that they can be able to interrogate anybody who aspires for a political office in this country. Only through that will we start getting leaders who can now be able to subscribe to the wishes, as Kevin is saying, to the wishes of the farmers, the wishes of the fishermen, the wishes of the laborers. That's the only way. But people have to start speaking up. Otherwise, we'll still retain the cult leadership, cult patronage politics that we've been used to, where if Michael is the one who's standing, we have to ask, where is he coming from and how much money does he have?
And which party does he belong to?
Yes.
Mr. Orengo, your advice to the electorate?
Be peaceful, and there is no place for violence. But what I really want to comment on your observation is that there is what is pragmatic, what really happens. I know he has suggested a lot of points where we could use to better manage our electoral process. But in the ground, what is pragmatic? Those democratic ethos, they don't exist in the country right now. Those framework he actually stipulates. It's very difficult to find a framework during off elections to go about engaging the citizens by that. So they're good ideas, but they're not pragmatic. It's not what our democratic ethos has now. I think we need a little bit further to go, maybe another years, to have that framework where citizens, like you take the case of people participating in Iowa, where they go and meet the president, they tell them what their concerns are. We still don't have that democratic ethos. So it's a good idea, but to get a framework to do that all over the country is good.
It's a bit of a challenge.
It's a bit of a challenge, but it's a good idea.
Okay, Kevin Osido, your closing comments.
Those frameworks exist. I want to encourage my brother to read the County Governments Act, read the Urban Areas and Cities Act. They present opportunities for citizens to even organize themselves effectively. They are recognized in those acts by law, which is anchored on Chapter 1 of the Constitution, which addresses sovereignty of the people. Back to the people of Ugenya and Embakasi South, the sovereignty of any political space is yours. It is in your hands. You have a choice to wake up on Friday morning to go and vote or not. But remember, not voting is as good as voting for the wrong person. Why do you want to wake up in the morning to go and vote? Please find a good reason to want to go and vote. Ensure that your political space is protected. The Constitution has protected you. Make that wise decision. Be peaceful. Love one another. And those seats are for yours and for yours for the taking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll have to wind it up right there. That's Kevin Osido from Governance Watch, Apollo Orengo, governance expert, Mule Musau, who's the National Coordinator, Elections Observation Group. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. And it's now 24 minutes